In 2017, the Japanese population was gripped by horror after a terrifying case was solved. The disappearance of a young woman led to an investigation that uncovered a gruesome series of crimes. This dreadful story unfolded in Yokohama, the capital of Japan's Kanagawa Prefecture. The central figure in this tragic tale was 23-year-old Tamura Aiko from the city of Hachioji. Her family, consisting of her parents and older brother, was plunged into despair after her sudden disappearance. Tamura was a quiet, withdrawn girl who dropped out of high school and lived with her mother after her parents' divorce. In May 2017, her mother died from an illness, which was a devastating blow to Tamura and led to mental health problems. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and her condition worsened to the point that she needed to be treated in a psychiatric clinic. Despite the distance, Tamura's brother supported her through social media with words of comfort and hope. Things seemed to be going well, and it appeared that his sister's life was slowly improving. However, in October 2017, the girl disappeared without a trace. During the desperate search for his sister, a series of crimes came to light that shook all of Japan. The fate of Tamura and other victims left no one indifferent. The case is considered one of the most heinous in the country's history. Let's go back to October 23, 2017. It was a Monday marked by silence, as Tamura hadn't been heard from for 3 days, much to the distress of her older brother. Concerned about her fragile health and her tendency to make impulsive decisions, he decided to search her social media for clues about her whereabouts. The post written on September 20th sent chills down his spine. Tamura wrote, "I want to die, but not alone. If you want to join me, send me a text. I'm ready to meet in Tokyo. Do you have a car?" Among several responses, one was particularly disturbing. "Take illegal substances or alcohol to numb the fear. My apartment is available for that." Tamura's reply, received 21 days later, was filled with despair. "Can we do it today? I only have 1,000 yen. We can do without weapons. Where are you? Are you a man or a woman?" This dialogue alarmed Tamura's brother, who feared an ominous encounter. To find her, he posted a missing person notice on her account, describing the mysterious man and asking the public for help. After a day of fruitless searching, the man contacted the police. The officers immediately launched an investigation, which quickly led to a crucial clue. Tamura was last seen on October 23rd at 1:45 p.m. at Hachioji Station, accompanied by a man in his mid-20s with shoulder-length black hair and a slender build. It was found that they traveled from Hachioji to Machida Station and then took the Odawara line to Sobudaimai Station in Asama, far from her home. By 2:04 p.m., they were already there, but by 7 p.m., they had both disappeared from the station. The case took a new turn when one of the internet users who had communicated with the man wrote on Tamura's account and provided information. It was a young woman who said she had arranged to meet the man at Sobudaimai Station on October 30th. The police advised the woman not to go there and instead sent undercover investigators, including Tamura's brother. In the afternoon, the surveillance team spotted a man matching the description on the video, seemingly waiting for someone. Being cautious, they followed him to a 2-story house nearby, just 750 meters from the station. The man entered his apartment and was followed by the police. When the officers knocked on the door, they smelled a foul odor. When the door swung open, they were met with a grim sight. Tamura's brother immediately noticed her white bag inside. When asked about Tamura, the man gestured toward the freezer, suggesting her presence. The apartment's layout was simple yet unsettling. Upon entering, there was a bathroom to the left and a kitchen above, with a small attic. This was also the living room where the horrific discovery was made. The police found 8 boxes, and following the man's instructions, they opened the freezer, revealing a monstrous scene. Beneath layers of cat litter were human heads, legs, arms, and various bones, the remains of those who had disappeared some time ago. A quick inspection of the 8 boxes in the living room showed that 7 contained dismembered human bones, while the 8th was a chaotic heap. The man was immediately arrested, and a large number of police officers arrived at the scene to begin an official investigation. At the crime scene, along with the box of toxic substances, the other 7 boxes contained a total of 9 human heads and 240 bones, emitting an unbearable stench of decay. In the blood-soaked bathroom, the police also found a saw, scissors, a rope, and various incriminating tools, as well as several pairs of shoes and leather wallets. The forensic investigation revealed that one of the 9 victims was male, and all were dismembered. The causes of death are still unclear. The most recent death occurred less than 2 weeks ago, and the earliest about 3 months prior. When the news spread, a crowd, including many journalists, gathered outside the house, forcing the police to cover the crime scene with a blue tarp. The neighbors interviewed by the officers said there were no unusual noises that could not be attributed to the nearby railway line. However, many residents had noticed an unpleasant smell since the man had moved into the first floor of the building. On November 9, 2017, 16 days after the incident, the police identified 9 victims through DNA matches. They included Miura Mitsuki, a 21-year-old office worker from Atsugi in Kanagawa Prefecture, 15-year-old high school student Hongi Ishihara, and other individuals aged 17 to 26, many of whom suffered from mental illnesses. The case shocked Japanese society and raised the question of how the perpetrator managed to commit 9 consecutive murders in just a few months. The identity of the suspect was later revealed. Takahiro Shiraishi, born in October 1990 in Zama City, became the central figure in a series of gruesome crimes. He was 27 years old, unemployed, and lived only about 3 kilometers from his parents' house in Zama City. His life was marked by complex circumstances and dark obsessions. Takahiro's family, consisting of his parents and younger sister, led a seemingly ordinary life. His father worked as a car parts salesman, and his mother was a housewife. However, behind this facade, Takahiro harbored deep-seated selfishness and disregard for the feelings of others. His childhood was marked by aloofness. In elementary and middle school, he was withdrawn and barely visible, even in his graduation photo. Family discord, culminating in his parents' divorce, led Takahiro to choose to live with his father. During this time, he often skipped school and took part-time jobs to become independent. During this period, he made an unsuccessful attempt to end his life with the help of burning charcoal, along with others who had similar intentions. After graduating from school, Takahiro got a job at a supermarket, where he was described as a hard worker and very responsible. Later, he moved to an electronics manufacturer. At the same time, he delved into the dark world of pimping and became involved with shady individuals. In August 2012, at the age of 22, Takahiro moved to the notorious Kabukicho district in Tokyo, a hub of adult entertainment. There, he took a job recruiting women for one of the local establishments. Takahiro earned a good income of up to 300,000 yen, including referral fees and commissions. Despite this, due to his extravagant lifestyle, he had little or no savings. In February 2017, the turning point came when Takahiro was arrested in Kabukicho for trafficking minors. He was subsequently sentenced to 12 months in prison with probation and 3 years of probation. During his probation period, he worked for a logistics company for a while before returning to Zama City in Kanagawa Prefecture. After his return, Takahiro began living a secluded life, spending his days in a darkened room immersed in the world of the internet. Such isolation is not uncommon in Japanese culture and is attributed to various societal pressures. With a tragic statistic of 70 suicides per day, Japan ranks first in the world in this regard. Takahiro exploited the dark currents on the internet, where death and suicide were hotly debated. He set up 5 social media accounts, one for public discussions on these painful topics, and 4 for personal use. The man cleverly manipulated these accounts to connect with vulnerable people. From this point on, Takahiro Shiraishi embarked on a cruel journey, exploiting the weaknesses of the desperate and laying the groundwork for his eventual descent into becoming a murderer. In August 2017, the path of the 27-year-old unemployed Takahiro Shiraishi crossed with that of Miura Mitsuki, a 20-year-old office worker. Mitsuki, who had been bullied in high school, suffered from adjustment disorders and often sought solace in the dark corners of social media. Here, she connected with like-minded people who shared her gloomy thoughts. Fate decided that Mitsuki narrowly escaped death during a planned group suicide on the beach. This incident led her to Takahiro and another online acquaintance, 20-year-old Takugo Nishinaki. The trio met in a park and planned to commit suicide together. After careful consideration, however, Nishinaki decided to back out and start a new life. Here is the translation. To begin with, Muki, who is saddened by Nishinaki's departure, informs Takahira that she will also not continue. Over time, however, Takahira developed a close online relationship with Mitsuki and discovered her considerable savings. Seeing her as a romantic and financial target, he carefully devised a diabolical plan. Takahiro acquired tools, a saw, a rope, and rented an apartment near Soba Daimi Station, which later became notorious as the scene of his brutal crimes. The accessibility of the apartment and the lack of surveillance made it an ideal location for executing his criminal intentions. Under the pretext of needing a deposit for the apartment, Takahira convinced Mitsuki to lend him 5,000 yen, about $3,000. 3 days after moving in, he arranged to meet her at the apartment, where he gave her sleeping pills, and when she fell asleep, he deliberately killed her with a rope he had prepared. Subsequently, the man raped the girl's corpse multiple times. For the next 3 days, Takahira spent meticulously dismembering Mitsuki's body in the bathtub. As the decomposition process began, he started storing the body parts in the refrigerator. Night after night, he discreetly disposed of the remains in nearby garbage bins. The difficulty of severing and disposing of the head prompted him to buy ice boxes and cat litter to hide it. On August 28, 2017, Takahiro Shiraishi's gruesome crime spree continued. This time, his victim was a 15-year-old student named Hongi Ishihara. Ishihara was a reclusive girl who enjoyed meeting new friends online. In middle school, she often argued with her mother over her studies, and after a particularly heated argument, she ran away from home. During this vulnerable time while browsing social media, she met Takahira. Following his usual method, he lured her to his apartment, where he repeated the same ruthless actions as with his previous victim. The mysterious disappearance of Mitsuki and Ishihara alarmed their families, who quickly alerted the authorities. The investigation revealed a chilling coincidence. The last traces of their phones were found near the Sobui station in the city of Zama. Despite a thorough search of the area, no clues were found. Takahira, who had holed up in his apartment, remained undetected. The story of 20-year-old Takugo Nishinaki, a young man with pronounced autism, became yet another horrific act. A painful breakup with his girlfriend led to his hospitalization, and a subsequent encounter with his ex-girlfriend brought him to the brink of suicide, which was fortunately averted. Problems at work worsened his despair, leading him to think about death again. Takugo, who knew Mitsuki, texted Takahira when he couldn't reach her, and they arranged a meeting. Afterward, Takugo's desire to end his life surprisingly faded, and he even informed Takahira of his newfound determination to continue living. However, Takahira, sensing a potential threat that could link him to Mitsuki's disappearance and draw police attention, acted quickly. He lured the young man into his apartment under the pretext of a routine meeting, drugged him with illegal substances, and killed him in the same manner as Mitsuki and Ishihara. With 3 victims in his apartment, the stench of decay became unbearable. In a desperate attempt to mask the smell, Takahira tried cooking the remains, but the odor persisted. Although the neighbors noticed the foul smell, they attributed it to the nearby sewage system and did not investigate further, allowing Takahira to continue his heinous acts undisturbed. After committing 3 atrocious murders, Takahira Shiraishi did not stop and continued his bloody path. Soon, he found a romantic partner online who, unaware of his dark deeds, moved into his apartment. Takahiro's next victim was a 19-year-old university student, Saraki Hinako, who suffered from mental disorders caused by the intense pressure from her mother. On September 15, 2017, Takahiro took advantage of an opportunity when his girlfriend was not at home and lured Saraki Hinako into his hideout, where he strangled, raped, and murdered her. Shortly after, Takahira attacked 26-year-old Hitomi Fujima, a divorced woman struggling with her child's disability and unstable family circumstances. Her desperation, expressed on social media amid a second divorce and a forced move, caught Takahira's predatory eye. Their encounter took a fateful turn when Hitomi received a call from her ex-husband requesting a meeting. Fearing this call might thwart his plans, Takahira decided to end her life swiftly and mercilessly. To reduce the smell from his victims, he devised an elaborate ventilation system for the apartment. His ruthless attacks claimed 4 more victims. In total, he killed 9 people. The 9th box at the crime scene was fortunately empty. It was intended for the 10th victim, but timely police intervention prevented another tragedy. Due to the complexity of the case and the need for meticulous evidence collection, the trial's commencement was delayed by almost 3 years. On September 30, 2020, the hearing finally began in a Tokyo court, where Takahira declared, "I regret killing some of my victims, with whom I spent a lot of time, and I want to apologize to those families. But as for the others, I truly regret nothing. The only thing I regret is that I failed when I was caught." The man has since confessed to killing and dismembering 9 people. Takahira claimed his motive was intimacy. He wanted to exploit his victims' vulnerability to manipulate and abuse them, satisfy his fantasies, and not worry about them rejecting his advances. His defense attorney requested a reduction in sentence due to his alleged psychological issues. However, the court found no reason for a reduced sentence and sentenced Takahiro Shiraishi to death on December 15, 2020. After the verdict, the man's lawyers filed an appeal, which Takahiro withdrew 3 days later, stating that he did not want to unnecessarily trouble his relatives by prolonging the proceedings. He also stated that all the charges against him were true, and he did not wish to contest the verdict. The Japanese agency responsible for the use of social networks has since revised its rules and banned content related to suicide and self-harm, ensuring that all violations are promptly removed. This horrific case highlights the sanctity of life and the importance of resilience in the face of despair. It reminds us to seek help and support in the most challenging moments of life, as circumstances can change. Thank you for watching, and take care of yourself.
You can be friends for many years, know each other since childhood, and still never really know a person well enough. Sometimes, people only skillfully pretend to be friends, playing on others' feelings and responding to sincerity and trust with lies and underhanded betrayal. Of course, a life without disappointments is impossible, but we still least expect betrayal from our friends and sometimes rely on them blindly. The story of a young British student shocked the entire country with its cruelty and cynicism. But the most important thing is that, despite the lack of an alibi and his strange behavior, the perpetrator was not initially suspected. The reason for this was that they had known each other since childhood, were neighbors, and had been friends for many years. When the truth came to light, Neither the parents of the murdered woman, nor the numerous mutual friends of the deceased and the murderer could believe it. Only the surviving victims of the seemingly harmless young man believed it. Keely Bunker was born on September 19, 1999, in the British town of Tamworth, Staffordshire, in Western England. She was the eldest of 3 children and the only daughter in the humble Bunker family. From an early age, Keely was a true supporter of her mother, helping her raise and care for her younger brothers. The girl was always very close to her family, and her parents described her as the best daughter anyone could wish for. Those around her valued her as friendly, helpful, and very kind, as she never hesitated to help anyone. After graduating from high school, the talented and determined Keely was able to study at a teacher training college at a prestigious public research university. Her happiness knew no bounds, and her parents were very proud of their daughter. The girl quickly integrated into her new community and made friends. She easily connected with other people, and her studies came quite easily to her. At the same time, Keely continued to dance and maintain an active social life, attending concerts, sporting events, various parties, and other events with fellow students. She had profiles on popular social media, where she regularly posted photos of herself and reported on her studies, hobbies, and important events in her life. In the summer of 2019, at the age of 19, Keely began looking for her first job and soon found luck. She was invited to an interview for a position as a teaching assistant at an elementary school. Coincidentally, it was the very school she had recently graduated from. She was overjoyed to be returning and was scheduled to start work at the end of September. Keely took a part-time position at the elementary school to balance her work with university studies. She carefully prepared for this new phase of her life, convinced it would be an excellent start to her career in education. At the same time, she wanted to celebrate her 20th birthday, her first birthday as an adult. She planned to spend the Saturday evening of September 7, 2019, at home with her family. The quiet and cozy celebration was attended only by her parents, her younger brothers, her grandparents, and her maternal uncle with his wife and children. These were the people who stood close to Keely and whom she loved the most. She decided to celebrate her birthday with her friends a few days later. The following Saturday, September 14, the student organized a party and gathered friends and fellow students in one of the city's entertainment venues. They celebrated and danced until the morning, and Keely looked very happy and content. Among the invited guests were Keely's best friend, Monique Riggin, as well as her neighbor and childhood friend, Wesley Street, with whom Keely had gone to the same school and had been friends since the first grade. Nothing indicated any misfortune, and no one could have guessed that the student had less than a week to live. Monique gave her friend tickets for her birthday to a concert of her favorite rapper, which was to take place on Wednesday, September 18th, in the neighboring city of Birmingham. They drove to the concert together and planned everything in advance. The students had several options for getting to and from the concert in the other town. Firstly, both had driver's licenses and their own cars, but since the friends planned to relax and have a drink that evening, they abandoned this idea. Secondly, someone from Keely or Monique's family could have picked them up, but they didn't want to disturb anyone, as the artist's performance ended around 1 p.m., and everyone had to go to work the next day. The third option, traveling by train themselves, seemed the best. However, there was a small catch. The train ran according to a schedule, and at night there was only one connection to Tamworth. But the friends were not worried about it, and were confident they would manage, as they still had plenty of time after the concert. On the agreed day, the students met and went to their favorite artist's concert together. They had a great time, enjoying the music, dancing, and singing along. After the event, still in high spirits and with time to kill before the last train left, they decided to go to a bar to sit and chat for a while. There they met Wesley, who had originally come with another group. When the young man saw Keely and Monique, he joined them at the table. They continued chatting and drinking cocktails. The young people were so excited that they didn't even notice how quickly the time passed. When they realized the time, they had missed the night train to their city. They didn't want to wake their parents to pick them up, so they decided to take a taxi home. Besides, the three of them shared the fare, so it wasn't expensive for the students. A surveillance camera at the entrance to the entertainment venue recorded two young women and a young man leaving the bar at around 9:30 a.m. and getting into a taxi. The ride home took about half an hour, and everyone got out at the intersection next to Monique's house. Keely had left her cosmetic bag and perfume with her the day before when they went to the concert and wanted to get her things. Monique offered her friends to stay the night at her house, but Bunker had plans for the next day. She wanted to change clothes and get some things from her room. Keely's house was no more than a 15-minute walk away. Besides, her boyfriend lived in the same town, but on a parallel street. She even joked, saying to her friend, "I have Wesley. I have nothing to fear with him. He can defend both of us." Monique could do nothing but agree. The friends said their goodbyes at the front door, after which Monique returned to the house. About half an hour later, Monique texted her friend to ask if she'd arrived safely and if everything was okay, but she didn't reply. The student didn't attach any importance to it and didn't panic, assuming her friend had simply fallen asleep, as they were all exhausted. After such an eventful day, Monique also went to sleep and made no further attempts to call or text Keely. Keely's parents didn't immediately raise the alarm either, as they knew how mature, responsible, and independent their daughter was. They trusted her completely and couldn't imagine that anything bad could have happened. Throughout the evening and most of the night, Keely posted photos from the concert and the bar on her social media page, so her father and mother could see where and with whom she was spending time. Since they knew Monique and Wesley well, they were not worried. When it turned out in the morning that the young woman had not spent the night at home, the parents assumed that Keely had stayed with her best friend, which had happened several times before. Monique woke up the next day around noon and saw that her friend hadn't responded to her message. This struck her as odd, but she reassured herself that perhaps Keely had wanted to sleep in, or that she was in such a hurry that she didn't have time to call or write. In any case, Monique believed that the missing girl's parents would have already raised the alarm if something had happened. However, when Keely still hadn't responded by around 3 p.m., and her phone was switched off, her friend began to suspect something was wrong. She called Keely's family herself and asked if their daughter was all right. Needless to say, after this call, real panic broke out, because it turned out that Keely hadn't spent the night at home or with Monique. The friend explained that Keely had refused to stay the night with her because she had plans the next day and had gone home with Wesley, who had agreed to accompany her since they were headed in the same direction anyway. After that, the student stopped calling and her phone was switched off. It was urgent to speak to the young man and find out what had happened and where Keely had gone. The terrified parents went to Wesley's house to find out everything. The door was opened by the sleepy young man, who was very surprised to be told that Keely hadn't come home the previous night. He admitted that he hadn't accompanied his friend to the front door, but only to the phone booth on the corner, where their paths diverged. It was no more than 50 meters to Keely's house, and she said she could manage the rest on her own. Wesley Street said he didn't insist, as he was very tired and wanted to go to bed quickly. After saying goodbye to Keely, he turned onto his street and didn't even look back to check if she had arrived. Moreover, when he got home, he didn't call her to ask if everything was okay, but simply turned off his cell phone and went to sleep without a care in the world. Now he felt guilty and scolded himself for not having accompanied his friend to the door. Upon hearing Wesley's account, the Bunker couple immediately reported Keeley's disappearance to the police. Surprisingly, law enforcement responded quickly to the situation and didn't wait the required 24 hours. The key witnesses in the case were Monique and Wesley, as they were the last people to see and have contact with the missing woman. These two weren't suspected from the start, as they had grown up with Keeley and had been friends since childhood. Nevertheless, they had to be questioned thoroughly, as their statements could be crucial to the investigation. The young people were willing to cooperate with the police and seemed eager to help. They described the sequence of events in detail, down to the minute, after all three had gotten out of the taxi, and their statements agreed on almost every point. As the friends said their goodbyes in front of Monique's house, Wesley and Keeley continued on alone, and according to Wesley, he didn't notice anything suspicious or disturbing on the street. He claimed that he didn't accompany his girlfriend to her front door because he was sick from the alcohol and didn't want to vomit in front of her. He said that he and Keeley walked together to an old telephone booth on the corner. Then Keeley continued straight ahead while he hurried to turn the corner because he felt nauseous. Afterward, he didn't return to the intersection to at least keep an eye on his friend and make sure she had arrived home safely. Unfortunately, on the section where Keeley walked, surveillance cameras were inoperative, making it impossible to verify her safe arrival. Since the events had occurred in the middle of the night, no casual witnesses could be found, and none of the neighbors had seen or heard anything suspicious. The police decided to search the Bunker family's house, assuming Keeley had arrived there but then left. However, this assumption proved to be false, and there was no evidence in the house or in Keeley's room that the missing woman had been there the previous night. The investigators also found nothing suspicious or unusual. Afterward, Monique and Wesley decided to talk to them again. They recounted, step by step, everything that had happened to them during the night. No new details came to light, so the police decided to determine Keeley's location using her cell phone. However, the device was switched off, and the last signal received that night was at the location where she had disappeared. At the request of law enforcement, the mobile phone provider provided data on calls and messages from the missing student's phone, but no clues were found there either. Monique then gave the police the passwords for her best friend's social media pages so they could check her messages. Investigators suspected that Keeley had arranged to meet someone, but this theory could not be confirmed. Keeley was last online around 2:00 a.m. when she posted a few photos from the bar where she was sitting with Monique and Wesley. When Monique and Wesley were summoned again to testify, Monique appeared immediately. She seemed very upset, crying, blaming herself for what had happened to her friend, and was willing to reveal any information. The young man, on the other hand, seemed more irritable with each subsequent questioning, and began to perceive the repeated conversations with the police as a form of suspicion. Furthermore, Wesley became entangled in his statements, changing them and adding or omitting some seemingly insignificant details. For example, he said he felt nauseous almost immediately after parting ways with Keeley, but couldn't remember exactly where it happened, ultimately claiming he was mistaken and that nothing of the sort had happened. He explained these inaccuracies by saying that his memories were distorted due to the heavy consumption of strong alcohol that evening. These inaccuracies were alarming, but the police didn't jump to conclusions. However, When Wesley was asked again to repeat the entire sequence of events, he became frantic and directly asked what he was accused of. His behavior raised more and more questions. Nevertheless, there was still no evidence against the young man. Keely's parents were informed of the young man's suspicious behavior, but they found nothing unusual in it, noting that Wesley had been friends with their daughter since elementary school and was surely just very worried about her. Monique also suspected that her friend was overexcited and tormented by guilt over her disappearance. From the police station, the investigators, along with Monique and Wesley, returned to the spot where the friends had parted to check whether they had perhaps overlooked any important details. Monique tried to remember every detail as best she could, while the young man stopped answering direct questions and began to justify himself as if he were being accused. Since they found no significant clue, the police organized a large-scale search for the missing student that same day. Search teams were formed, including law enforcement officers and volunteers, as well as members of the Bunker family, their friends, including Monique and Wesley, neighbors, and compassionate people. The entire area was divided into squares for clarity. Abandoned or unfinished buildings and a spacious park with strips of woods and a lake were carefully searched. At around 9 p.m., a terrible discovery was made right on the shore of the body of water. A group led by Keely's uncle, Jason Bunker, came across a strange pile of branches and leaves. They had barely begun their investigation when they discovered the body of a woman lying motionless, face down. It was the missing student. The unfortunate woman's body was half submerged in water, covered by branches and scattered with leaves and grass. Her clothing was in disarray, clearly indicating sexual violence. Keely's parents confirmed that these were their daughter's remains. After a thorough examination by forensic experts, the body was handed over to the medical examiner. As suspected, Keely had been abused, and the attacker's DNA was found on her. The cause of death was asphyxiation. The unfortunate woman was killed with her bare hands. Furthermore, traces of numerous blows were found on her body. Abrasions, bruises, and defensive wounds on her hands indicate that she desperately defended herself and fought for her life. A toxicology test revealed a low level of alcohol in the deceased's blood, suggesting that Keely wasn't drunk and was aware of what was happening to her. The case was converted to homicide, and Wesley immediately became the prime suspect as he was the last person to see Keely alive. He was arrested, but since there was still no conclusive evidence against him, he couldn't be detained for long initially. Interestingly, Wesley now behaved completely calmly, detached, and even indifferently. A check revealed that the suspect's cell phone had been turned off at almost the same time and in the same place as the victim's. The young man had fresh bruises and scratches on his hands, the origin of which he couldn't clearly explain. He remained silent and demanded a lawyer. There were several surveillance cameras in the park, and their recordings were carefully examined by experts. One of them showed a couple resembling Wesley and Keely walking along the avenue. About a quarter of an hour later, a dark male figure with a hood on his head ran off toward the park exit. Although his face was not recognizable, no one doubted it was Wesley. When the arrested man was shown these images, he gave a surprising version of the events of that night. According to him, Keely suggested they go to the park to walk and talk. They had fun, fooling around, and Wesley playfully put his friend on his shoulders, but only got a few meters. Due to his alcohol consumption, he allegedly slipped, lost his balance, and fell. The woman sitting on his shoulders hit her head hard on the curb and showed no signs of life. Wesley claimed he was very frightened when he realized Keely wasn't breathing. In his panic, he left her in the park and fled. However, The investigation revealed no signs of a traumatic brain injury on Keely's body consistent with a fall. The suspect then suggested that someone else had found Bunker and attacked her, after which he tried to dispose of the body by drowning her in the park's lake. The results of the forensic lab soon came in, showing that traces of Wesley's DNA were found on the victim's body. The suspect then told a new, even more unbelievable version of the events. He now claimed that Keely had lured him to the park herself, and that they had consensual intimacy. He emphasized that everything was voluntary, and that they then said their goodbyes. In his opinion, Keely had been attacked by someone else on the way home. However, the autopsy revealed injuries consistent with forced assault. With his back against the wall, Wesley again changed his statement, claiming that it was an accident during intimacy where he choked her too hard. No one believed the version that Keely might have flirted with Wesley. Keely considered him not only a best friend but a brother, and had never imagined that anything could happen between them. This was unanimously confirmed by all of the murdered students' friends and relatives. The motive was classified as a crime of passion and opportunity. However, as the investigation progressed, even more horrific details from Wesley's biography came to light. As it turned out, this was by no means his first assault on women, but it was the first time he had committed murder. Two other victims of Wesley's, whom he had previously abused, testified in court. Previously, the victims had remained silent for fear, but when they saw on the news that Wesley had been arrested, they decided to report his atrocities. The criminal's trial began in September 2020. Wesley Street was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, with the right to early release after at least 30 years. He has never admitted his guilt and hasn't apologized to the relatives of the woman he killed. To this day, the perpetrator maintains that Keely's death was merely a tragic accident. Thanks for watching, and take care. 10-year-old Brooke Wilberger lived in Oregon and grew up in a large family. She was the fifth of 6 children. Learning came easily to her, and she was a promising athlete who loved basketball, snowboarding, and running. When Brooke was 16, she began dating her longtime boyfriend, Justin. Both were devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. While Justin was serving a 2-year mission for the church, Brooke enrolled at Brigham Young University in Utah. As a child, Brooke had speech difficulties and didn't begin speaking until she was 4. Her choice of university was largely due to the fact that it had one of the best speech therapy schools. She dreamed of helping people with speech problems and helping them gain more self-confidence. Her family said that although Brooke was shy, she never kept quiet when she felt something or someone was unfair. She had outgrown her small community and wanted to see more, so she was ready for college life. Her first year went extremely well. After her freshman year, Brooke, like many other college students, returned home for the summer, hoping to earn some extra money to get her through the next few months. Her sister Stephanie got her a job at the Oak Park apartment complex in Corvallis, about 50 kilometers from her parents' house. Stephanie not only lived there but also managed it with her husband, making it the ideal summer job for Brooke. It was easy and didn't restrict her active social life. She planned to stay with Stephanie for a few days, work her shifts, and then meet up with friends. On May 24, 2004, early in the week on a warm Monday in Corvallis, Oregon, Stephanie and Brooke had agreed to have lunch together between shifts. Around 10 a.m., Stephanie looked out the window and saw Brooke filling a bucket of water to clean the streetlights. A few hours later, as she was busy cooking lunch for her children and her sister, Stephanie suddenly realized it was well past 1 p.m. Brooke was running late. Stephanie grabbed the children and jokingly said, "Okay, let's form a search party," and set out to explore the area. She thought Brooke was talking to one of the neighbors or engrossed in her work. The bucket of water and cleaning supplies were next to the lamppost. As she got closer, Stephanie noticed Brooke's flip-flops. They were dirty, and the toe strap was broken. Stephanie felt as if they had literally been ripped off her feet when she tried to hold on. She called her husband, and they searched the area a bit more. When they discovered Brooke's cell phone, purse, and wallet in her locked car around 3 p.m., it was clear it was time to call 911. The police responded immediately to Stephanie's alarm. Clearly, Brooke wasn't someone who just disappeared without a word. Several residents reported hearing screams around 10:30 a.m., but no one had seen anything. The news spread instantly. While some investigators questioned residents, others checked out local criminals. There were about 2,000 in the area, so they had a lot of work ahead of them. Of course, they wanted to talk to her boyfriend Justin. But he was halfway around the world on a mission in Venezuela, and everyone confirmed his alibi. He and Brooke had dreamed of a wedding and a large family. And Justin couldn't believe this was now his reality. He was quickly removed from the list of suspects. The whole town was in fear. Someone dangerous was still among them. Who would be the next victim? Brooke's case quickly became one of the most notorious in Oregon's history. Hundreds of people joined the search, and even the FBI was called in. Tips about Brooke's possible whereabouts came in from all over the state, and even from neighboring regions. After a few days, investigators tracked down a man named Sung Koo Kim. He immediately became a suspect. The 30-year-old recluse lived with his parents 80 miles from Corvallis. Police became aware of him when it emerged that he had been stealing women's underwear from college dormitories for years. He already had a burglary conviction for this. One of the robbed dormitories was at the University of Oregon, just a stone's throw from Oak Park. A search of Kim's apartment found thousands of pairs of women's underwear. Investigators suspected that this behavior could easily escalate into something worse. Before dawn, almost a week after Brooke's disappearance, police raided Kim's house. On his computer, they found tens of thousands of photos and videos of sexual assault, torture, and mutilation, as well as a file named OSU. The document had been created after Brooke's disappearance, and its contents shocked everyone. It was essentially a guide on how to commit a sex crime and avoid punishment, detailing what to wear and what to carry. However, there was no direct evidence linking him to Brooke's disappearance. Despite the horrific discoveries, Kim was ultimately eliminated as a suspect. Data from his cell phone, computer, and receipts confirmed that he had been at home with his father that day, shopping. He was later sentenced to 11 years in prison for burglary and theft, and his family sued the authorities for excessive force during the search. They ultimately received a $331,000 settlement in compensation. Days and weeks passed. For a month, 19-year-old Brooke had vanished, and with each passing day, hopes of finding her faded. Investigators followed a lead regarding a dark green minivan, possibly a 1997 model, which had been mentioned several times in witness statements. They were looking for a man named Brian, who had called 911 to report the same minivan driving dangerously through town on the day Brooke disappeared. Several people had seen a similar van near the university. For example, Bob, a university employee, noticed it in a parking lot with a New Mexico license plate. The driver was talking to a female student, who later told staff that his behavior had frightened her. Another woman said the van had stopped abruptly in front of her. The man got out and opened the back door, and she immediately ran away. There were indications of a connection, but no one had been able to identify the owner of the car or his involvement. An agonizing 6 months passed with no new leads. Search crews stopped their work and life went on as before. And then in November, 2,200 kilometers from Corvallis in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the police received a call they couldn't ignore. It was too reminiscent of the Brooke case. A woman named Dara was out with her daughters when she saw a completely naked woman running down the street, hysterical and in tears. The woman ran to a restaurant and rattled the door. Dara stopped and took her into her car. The woman turned out to be a 22-year-old student from Russia. Tearfully, she recounted how she had been grabbed from behind, held at knife point, dragged into a car, raped, and then tied with her own shoelaces. The attacker, a tall, burly man with a shaved head and beard, drove her to an apartment complex. He entered one of the apartments, and she miraculously escaped. She called the police and described the car, a two-door red subcompact, with flowers inside, and a toy hanging from the window. The owner was quickly found. Joel Patrick Courtney, a married father of 3 from a suburb of Albuquerque. He was arrested a few blocks from the crime scene with a knife. It turned out that Joel was a repeat offender. In 1991, he had already been imprisoned for sexual assault and was subsequently arrested for multiple crimes. 38-year-old Joel had spent most of his adult life traveling the country, working odd jobs. He had been to Alaska, Florida, New Mexico, and Oregon. His wife Rosie had filed for a restraining order against him just a few days ago, after he tried to strangle her. His sister Dina said that as a child, Joel was a genius, and everyone predicted a bright future for him. But at 11, he began using illegal substances, progressing to harder drugs each year, and after that he became fascinated with Satanism. He didn't finish school and was regularly incarcerated for various crimes he committed starting at age 18. Dina even admitted that he used to sneak into her room at night, touching her, and attempting to abuse her. For a while it seemed as if he had reformed. At 21, Joel met Rosie. They had children, and despite all the horror she had endured because of him, Dina forgave her brother and tried to maintain their relationship. But after a few years he relapsed into illegal substances and alcohol, and things only got worse. At the time of his arrest, Joel was regularly using illicit substances, getting drunk, and had been arrested for drunk driving. He was quickly charged with the rape, kidnapping, and assault of the 22-year-old student. During the interrogation, one of the investigators couldn't help but think that the case was very similar to the Brooke Wilberger case, which was being hotly debated in the media at the time. The two young women looked very similar and were abducted in almost identical ways. The investigator contacted police in Oregon and asked if they knew anything about Joel. It turned out that Joel had been in the area with his family on the day of Brooke's disappearance. When his sister Dina learned of the arrest, she too immediately thought of the Brooke case. Although Brooke's body was never found, she was officially declared dead. While Joel was in his cell, investigators spent months gathering evidence. When they found the car he was driving at the time of the Oregon abduction, it turned out to be a dark green minivan, just like the one seen on the day Brooke disappeared. Crime scene investigators disassembled the car, examining every detail, and after several months, they reached a definitive conclusion. Brooke's DNA was found inside. In one of Joel's bags, they found her blonde hair tangled in a hair tie, and the investigation confirmed that she had been raped. Joel was arrested on November 29 for the kidnapping and rape of the college student in New Mexico. The crucial difference was that the woman in New Mexico escaped and survived. When Joel was read the charges regarding Brooke, he laughed about it with his cellmates all day. He stubbornly denied ever having heard of her. But when his mother visited him and asked him directly, "Did you kill her?" he hesitated, then declared that he would never be punished for it. In January 2007, despite Joel's statement that he was mentally ill and therefore insane, the court ruled that he was fully sane and would have to answer for his actions against Brooke. Brooke's mother Cammie learned this news while driving her car. Joel initially had to answer for the attack on the student in New Mexico. He eventually pleaded guilty and received 18 years in prison. In court, he behaved abominably and insulted the judge. The police admitted that the more he revealed his true colors, the more their anger boiled over. They swore that he would tell them where Brooke was, and would even turn the whole world upside down to do it. 5 years had passed since Brooke's disappearance. In 2010, Joel faced the death penalty in Oregon, and prosecutors offered him a plea deal. If he told them where the body was hidden, they would take the maximum sentence off the table. For months he mocked everyone and refused to cooperate. But after several brutal beatings by his fellow inmates, he suddenly softened. All this time, he had used his knowledge of the gravesite as a trump card. And now, he decided to sell this information. His condition was that he would serve the remaining 18-year sentence in New Mexico, closer to his family, and upon his release, he would return to Oregon, with the death penalty removed from his possible sentences. The deal was accepted. Joel pleaded guilty, finally giving her family what they had prayed for all these years. The Brooke Wilberger missing posters were removed 5 years after her disappearance. Oregon police had found the remains of the 19-year-old college student. The body was discovered under a fallen tree on private property 20 kilometers west of the abduction site. Her identity was confirmed using dental records and a silver watch that Cammie had given her daughter for Christmas, which was still on Brooke's wrist. The family, who had always behaved with dignity, even thanked Joel in court for giving them closure. Joel finally confessed that he had been specifically looking for a young woman on that fateful day. Before Brooke, he had attempted to kidnap 2 other female students, the very ones who had testified about the creepy van. However, when he saw Brooke alone, he changed tactics and pretended to be lost or making a delivery. As she approached, he grabbed her, held a knife to her throat, dragged her into the truck, tied her with duct tape, and raped her. Then he drove her to the woods, where he held her all night and beat her to death the next morning. He carefully hid the body and admitted that without his confession, it would never have been found. The exact crime scene in the Wilberger case has not been heavily disclosed, but it is known that it occurred in a remote, wooded area in Benton County. The residents are still in shock. Although Brooke's story devastated everyone, the residents don't want to change their lives completely out of fear. Joel never apologized to the family and showed no remorse. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The FBI believes Joel may be a serial killer, as connections have been investigated regarding other victims. Brooke's story has haunted the town for years, and former volunteers still have tears in their eyes. For Corvallis, this was a turning point. But residents don't want their town to be associated only with this tragedy. They went from cleaning lampposts and making plans for lunch to a nightmare in a matter of minutes. Cammie compares their grief to an iceberg. What the outside world sees is just the tip, but the true pain lies within and is immeasurably deeper. Thanks for watching, and take care. On the evening of August 27, 2000, a call came into the Birdsk City Police Department. The officer heard a disturbed male voice reporting that in Microdistrict A, House 50, in a birch grove, the body of a young woman with no signs of life had been found. Law enforcement officers, dog handlers, forensic experts, as well as the head of the police department and representatives of the prosecutor's office immediately went to the crime scene. Such urgency was unusual for a quiet Saturday evening in a provincial Siberian town, but the situation demanded it. The examination of the crime scene and the victim's body indicated that investigators were not looking for a random offender, but for a murderer obsessed with a perverse sexual fantasy. The young woman's body had been found by a local resident who had planned to go fishing that morning and had gone to the birch grove between the houses the previous evening to collect worms. The body lay only a few meters from the path. The woman, about 20 years old, was almost naked. Next to her lay her blouse, which the perpetrator had removed. No other belongings were found. The attacker had taken the victim's personal items together with her handbag. The victim's identity was established surprisingly quickly. Among the crowd gathered near the crime scene was Vladimir Frolohol, who had been searching for his girlfriend Svetlana Menina for a day. When the young woman's body was carried away on a stretcher, the man recognized his partner. Frolohol told police officers that he and his girlfriend lived at number 50. On August 26th, the couple had visited Vladimir's relatives, where around 8 p.m. they had an argument, and the young woman had walked home alone. Investigators wondered how Svetlana had ended up in the forest, a place locals usually avoided late at night. However, that night, the young woman had decided to take exactly that route. The search of the houses near the crime scene continued well after midnight and yielded no results. None of the residents had seen or heard anything. A detailed conversation with the victim's boyfriend revealed that, in addition to her clothing, The deceased Svetlana had been carrying a handbag, silver jewelry, and a watch. Forensic experts determined that Svetlana had died almost a day before her discovery. This meant she had been killed about half an hour after saying goodbye to her boyfriend. After the rape, the victim was strangled. Investigators concluded that the young woman had been lured into the forest either by an attractive young man or by someone she knew, since she had not attempted to escape or call for help. The victim simply had no time to resist. It was decided to investigate the victim's closest acquaintance, her boyfriend Vladimir. Investigators were interested in the details of their quarrel at a relative's house. Immediately after the argument, Svetlana went home alone, and Vladimir also left the party. At the time of the crime, he had no solid alibi. Theoretically, Vladimir could have caught up with his girlfriend and continued the argument, which escalated into violence and murder out of jealousy or revenge. Investigators developed a reliable method to verify this version. At that time, the laboratory results were already available. In addition to mechanical asphyxiation, experts determined the perpetrator's blood type from the semen sample, which did not match Vladimir's. Therefore, the young man was cleared of suspicion. Investigators checked all relatives, friends, and acquaintances they could locate for possible involvement in the death, but without success. The investigators concluded that the murderer was a stranger after all. After re-examining the crime scene data, they determined that since the crime was committed near the victim's home, the attacker was either not afraid of being seen or was unaware that he might be noticed. This suggested that he either had a criminal record or was mentally unstable. A decision was made to check all persons with sexual deviations registered in clinics, as well as those previously convicted of similar offenses. A considerable amount of work was undertaken. Exactly 2 weeks after the discovery of Svetlana Minina's body on the morning of September 10th, the entire staff of the Berdsk prosecutor's office and police were alerted again. This time, a body was found in a forest near the shore of the Ob Sea, not far from a hiking trail. 5 meters away, the body of a young woman was discovered. The scene differed little from the crime 2 weeks earlier. The young woman had been abused and killed. A brown bag with an inscription in English was found next to the body. Nothing else was discovered. In an effort to find even the slightest clue, the prosecutor's office asked colleagues in the regional capital for assistance. More than 100 Interior Forces soldiers combed the forest. Soon after, in the direction of District A, they found a blood-stained scarf, a vodka bottle, brown women's shoes, a black handbag, and several women's accessories scattered within a 200-meter radius. The connection between the two very similar crimes was obvious, and the conclusions were frightening. A madman was operating in the city. By this time, investigators had already discovered the perpetrator's third victim, not on the streets of Berdsk, but in an archive containing files of an unsolved murder of a 16-year-old student, Anastasia Fatkova. The crime had been committed almost a year earlier. The victim had been found in the same micro-district near house number 1. The attack had been bold. It took place in bushes 30 meters from a bus stop around 1 o'clock in the morning, when people were already on their way to work. The crime scene had very specific characteristics: abuse, suffocation, and the disappearance of all personal belongings without a trace. The investigations into these 3 crimes were combined into one criminal case. Local media informed residents about safety precautions because a murderer was on the loose in the town, and the characteristics of the latest victim were released in hopes that this would help identify the perpetrator. The entire population of Berdsk was in panic. Police officers and volunteers patrolled the streets at night. Parents did not allow their children, especially girls, to go out and often picked them up after school. The city administration developed a plan to increase security for the upcoming holiday, City Day. This phrase soon appeared in the criminal file. On September 11th, Vladimir Samokhvalov contacted the police and reported that his daughter had gone to rehearsal a few days earlier and had not returned. The man came to see the body that had been described on the radio and recognized her as his daughter. 22-year-old Tatiana Samokhvalova was studying wind instruments at the Novosibirsk Conservatory. A strange object found next to her body was a flute case. Samokhvalova was an independent woman who had a boyfriend with whom she sometimes stayed overnight, which is why her parents did not immediately notice her disappearance. Her father told investigators that his daughter had been well behaved, had no suspicious acquaintances, studied well, and played the flute. Investigators soon learned that the girl had left the cultural center where the rehearsal had taken place around 10 in the evening and shortly afterward, like her predecessors, had turned off a busy street onto a remote forest path. All three girls were found relatively close to each other, which led investigators to suspect that the killer lived nearby. Specialists helped create a psychological profile of the suspect and noted a very important detail. The perpetrator was attracted to shy, slender brunettes around 25 years old. This information was immediately passed to the media and recorded by the task force. Investigators checked numerous pawn shops and several hundred people. During this work, several other crimes were solved, but nothing related to the murderer was discovered. Soon, a strange man came under suspicion. For 4 months, from May to September, a certain clairvoyant who only saw women regularly rented an apartment at 104 Krasnaya Sibir Street. The suspect's name was Nikolai Voronov. During all 3 crimes, he had stayed in Bertsk and, thanks to his profession, easily gained women's trust. After learning about the police interest in him, the man himself came to the police station to clear himself of suspicion, which he managed to do. Soon, all leads were exhausted, and investigators could not find the real culprit. They concluded that the perpetrator had either left the city or learned about the manhunt and gone into hiding. Because of the long silence of the criminal, security measures in the city were gradually lifted, and Bertsk returned to its usual routine. However, the police understood that the perpetrator would reappear sooner or later. 2 years passed, and in December 2002, another violent crime occurred. On December 8th, Valentina Mogilnaya contacted the police with terrible news. She had found the body of her daughter Yulia in her apartment at number 10 in the same residential area. The woman had been abused and killed by strangulation. In the apartment, there were dishes on the table, 2 stacks, and an opened bottle of alcohol. All fingerprints had been wiped from the utensils. However, under the table, there was an empty beer bottle that the perpetrator had forgotten. This bottle was sent for examination. In addition, the killer had locked the door, and the traces indicated that the victim knew her murderer. 6 months earlier, Yulia had a steady partner who happened to have a key. Vladimir Semyonov was immediately arrested as a suspect, but he denied any involvement in the crime. His fingerprints did not match those on the beer bottle. Nevertheless, Vladimir seemed to be hiding something. An investigation of the building entrance led detectives to a friend of Semyonov, who reported that the suspect had visited him on the day of the crime and said he had found his girlfriend dead. He did not go to the police because he believed that, as a previously convicted criminal, they would blame him anyway. Forensic experts determined that the woman had died on December 7th. However, Vladimir had an alibi for that day, and the biological evidence from the victim did not match him. This definitively cleared him, and the investigation stalled again. Soon, the fingerprint examination results arrived. The comparison led investigators to a man who had repeatedly been detained in a sobering upstation, Alexei Gaskov. Police officers went to his home and arrested him. At first, he denied involvement in the victim's death, but later claimed that he had killed her accidentally. His blood type also matched the biological traces from the crime scenes, which at first seemed to confirm that the serial killer had finally been found after more than 2 years of searching. Gaskov later signed confessions to all the crimes. At first, everything seemed to go according to investigators' expectations. The suspect showed the locations of the crimes, but later inconsistencies appeared. When it came to the details and methods of the murders, Gaskov began to hesitate and confuse his statements. He gave information that contradicted the forensic findings. Only genetic testing could determine whether Alexei was actually involved in all 4 crimes. A few weeks later, forensic experts delivered their conclusion. The biological evidence found on the victims did not belong to this suspect. No one could explain why Gaskov had incriminated himself, and investigators had to start their work again. All men who were even remotely suspicious were subjected to genetic testing. Gaskov, however, remained under observation because he seemed to know something about the crimes. He refused to answer questions about them, but enjoyed talking about himself. He told investigators that he had attended drama school and wanted to work in Moscow, but had not been accepted. Law enforcement authorities then sent a request to Moscow and learned that on November 8, 2002, while Gaskov had still been in the capital, a 23-year-old Peruvian student had been abused and killed near Moscow. The crime remained unsolved. Investigators from Moscow came to question Gaskov about this case as well. There were several similarities. First, Alexei lived 5 minutes from the young woman's dormitory. Second, he left immediately after she was found dead. After questioning, the suspect confessed to attacking the Peruvian woman, but even genetic testing did not confirm his involvement. Later, Alexei Gaskov was sentenced to 10 years and 6 months in prison for abusing a young victim in another case. After a long time, the investigation took a new turn. One September night, a woman named Marina Vlasova, aged 30, came to the police station in Berdsk, claiming that someone had tried to abuse and kill her. She explained that she had been walking home late that evening when she met acquaintances accompanied by an unknown young man. He was slightly drunk, cheerful, and talkative, introduced himself as Misha, and offered to accompany her home. She agreed. After a brief conversation, the man dragged her into the bushes, threatened her, raped her, and then forced her to clean herself and leave with him. After some time, the assault was repeated, but the victim stopped resisting, which apparently distracted the attacker. Marina managed to free herself and escape. She ran to the road wearing only an undershirt, where a car stopped to help her. At first, Vlasova did not go to the police because she felt ashamed. But after hearing on television that a serial rapist was being sought, she decided to help investigators. From the man's acquaintances, investigators learned his name and address. The suspect was Mikhail Yudin, who lived at House 18 on Oktyabrskaya Street. Soon afterward, he was questioned at the station. Yudin did not deny being close to the woman, but claimed that everything had been consensual. Blood samples were taken from him for analysis, and he was released under supervision. However, he was immediately placed under covert surveillance. During a week of monitoring, investigators noticed nothing unusual. He did not try to escape. Investigators began to think they might once again be on the wrong track. A few weeks later, the laboratory results arrived, and they were sensational. All biological samples from the crimes matched Yudin's DNA. Police arrested him again and searched his apartment. Among various unidentified women's belongings, they found the watch belonging to the first victim. Investigators also discovered that Yudin owned an old shed. Inside it, they found the clothing of one victim and the flute of another. Investigators then began to examine Mikhail Yudin's past. Mikhail Alexandrovich Yudin was born on November 16, 1975, in the settlement of Nagorny in Altai Krai. He lived with his mother and brother. After finishing the 8th grade, he served in the army. After his discharge, he moved to the Novosibirsk region, where he worked in construction. From a young age, relatives and acquaintances noticed his reserved character and strange behavior, which changed only when he was drunk. Then, he became open, smiling, and sociable. In the summer of 1998, Yudin moved to Bertsk, where he met a woman, moved in with her, and worked on a construction team. The series of crimes had begun long before investigators started searching for the killer. On August 12, 1998, Yudin met a woman named Vera Nikolaeva near the fence of the Gigant plant, got to know her, and offered to escort her home. In a deserted area, he attacked, raped, and tried to kill her. Nikolaeva survived because workers arriving for the morning shift scared the attacker away. The woman reported the crime to the police, but the perpetrator was not caught at that time. A year later, in the summer of 1999, the killer committed his first murder. He dragged 16-year-old Anastasia Fatkova into the bushes near a bus stop and raped her for about an hour. When he heard passers-by approaching, he did not flee. Fatkova, still alive, tried to attract attention but failed. Yudin strangled her, took her watch and earrings, and left. He later gave the watch to his wife and the earrings to his mother. In the autumn of 1999, the construction crew where Yudin worked was transferred to Novosibirsk. On November 23rd, while drunk, he raped Olga Karpova in the entrance of her building and killed her. He took the woman's jacket and later gave it to his wife. A month after that attack, Yudin was arrested for attempted robbery and sentenced to 3 years in prison in February 2000. However, 3 months later he was released due to an amnesty. On July 14, 2000, Yudin was free again, and at the end of August he committed the crime that started the large manhunt. During the investigation, the killer confessed to 5 murders and 23 robberies and assaults. A forensic psychiatric examination determined that Mikhail Yudin was fully sane and aware of his actions. On June 7, 2004, the case was brought to court, and on December 2, he was sentenced to life imprisonment in the Polar Owl Penal Colony. His lawyer later appealed, but the Supreme Court of Russia upheld the verdict without changes. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.